Okay, good morning, viewers, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are listening and attending this panel discussion. My name is Viola Riak, and I will be the moderator for this panel discussion on bodily autonomy, the power to say yes, and the right to say no. This event will take maximum of 80 minutes. Please, I request all the viewers to write their questions on the chat box and ensure you address your questions to a specific panelist. Allow me to introduce to you our great and experienced panelists of today. Please allow me to welcome Ms. Nunu Diana Allison, founder and executive director of Young Women Positive South Sudan, an organization that works with adolescent girls and young women living with HIV. Nunu, you are welcome.
Hello, everyone. I hope all of you are so good. I'm Nunu Diana. I work for Young Positive South Sudan, an organization that works with adolescent girls and young women living with HIV/AIDS. I'm so grateful to see all of you today, and I hope this discussion will be so helpful to South Sudan and all the women and young girls in our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nunu, for being part of this panelist. Now, my next panelist and the only man in this discussion today is Mr. Bushiri Julius. And he is a South Sudanese public health specialist with a strong interest in sexual reproductive health and rights and policy programming. He has extensive work experience in academia, research, and humanitarian response. He prides himself as a male feminist and a promoter of girls' and women's empowerment in both private and professional life. He is also a creative artist with a thematic focus on social equality and health. Mr. Julius, you are highly welcome to this panel discussion.
Thank you so much, and I'm very grateful to be part of this panel. I look forward to a fruitful discussion this morning or evening, wherever you are.
Our third panelist, viewers, is Ms. Shruti Apudai. She is a gender equality and a human rights advocate with more than 20 years experience across South and Southeast Asia and Middle East, and now based in South Sudan. A feminist practitioner, Shruti is currently working as a gender specialist with UNFPA South Sudan. Prior to joining United Nations, she has worked with civil society organization, international organization, and government. Shruti is currently joining us from India. Shruti, you are welcome to this panel discussion.
Thanks a lot, Viola, and I'm very excited to be part of this discussion today and sharing the panel with Diana, Julius, Ria, and yourself. Very excited. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, our fourth panelist for this wonderful discussion is Miss Riha William. And Miss Riha William is a passionate about peace and women's human rights. She is best known for her role in peace building in schools and communities, and also being part of the South Sudan High-Level Revitalization Forum on Peace Process. Ms. Riha, you are welcome to this panel discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Viola. I'm happy to be here and join the rest of the panelists. So just dissect the topic.
Thank you very much, Riha. Now, viewers, I welcome you all to this wonderful discussion. And just to highlight how our program will go for today, we will have each panelist to present for 10 minutes. That's part one. Part two will be a Q&A with the audience. So please, we would love to hear from you. Write down your questions and we'll be able to have our panelists answer them. When you are asking a question, please direct your question to one of our panelists. For example, if your question goes to Shruti, please write Shruti names and ask the question directly. Now, in part two, you will have the opportunity to get your questions answered by the panelists you had addressed your question to. Now, the final part of this discussion will be part three, which will be a final word from each of the panelists member. Now, I expect this panel discussion to last not more than 80 minutes. And please allow me to go directly to the panel questions. Now, my first question goes to Ms. Shruti. Ms. Shruti, UNFPA South Sudan, in partnership with partners, recently launched the State of World Population Report entitled My Body is My Own, Claiming the Right to Autonomy and Self-Determination. What is bodily autonomy according to this report? The second question is, what does the report say about the right to exercise bodily autonomy and self-determination? The third question is, how is report and its finding relevant for South Sudan we are talking about today? Now, the fourth one under that part is, what are the 3 key takeaways message from that report? Ms. Shruti, the ball is yours. You're welcome.
Thanks a lot, Viola, again for this opportunity to have this very important discussion that is not just important for South Sudan. I think this is an issue that goes at the heart of the equality and human rights discussions. And I'm very happy that we at UNFPA have launched this report, which is part of the 2 years. Every year we launch a report that is of concern to the entire world. And this year's report, as you rightly said, talks about the right to bodily autonomy and self-determination. So in simple words, if we say what is right to bodily autonomy, it means the person's right to choose for one's own body and the future of it without any violence or any coercion. So, it involves seemingly simple but the most profound questions, like when and whether or with whom to have sex. A person's right to decide when, whether, or with whom you want to become pregnant. It means the freedom to go to a doctor whenever you need one. It means your right, and I mean the girl or the boy, both, right to decide who do you want to marry, when do you want to marry, how many children to have, and the spacing between the children. So it, in simple words, means the power to say yes where you want to say yes about your own body, and the right to say no. For example, the right to say no to being subjected to any violence, the right to say yes in terms of who you want to choose as your partner, a life partner, I mean. Now, when we look at the report, because it covers the whole world, the report mentions and has looked at the data from around the world, and the report has found and highlights that the status of bodily autonomy for women and girls and men and boys around the world, only 55% of the women are able to make their own decisions in specifically 3 dimensions about their own body. So the first dimension is who usually makes decisions about the healthcare for yourself. Are you free to go to a doctor and get your healthcare access when you want one? And if you are able to make that decision for yourself or somebody else decides for it. The second element is who usually makes the decision on whether or not should you use contraception. And the third is, can you say no to your intimate partner if you do not want to have a sexual intercourse? So the 3 key dimensions that are very intricately linked with the decisions about your own body, and they are how far are they influenced by others, whether it be their partners or families or societies or even the government. And the report underpins that only women who make their own decisions in all the three areas are considered to have autonomy in reproductive health decision making and to be empowered to exercise their reproductive rights. Now, coming to your third question about how is it relevant and what findings are relevant for South Sudan. And I think for South Sudan, it is an extremely important report because the report highlights how education is the key. There are examples cited where women with more education uh, are shown to be having more decision making about their own healthcare and thereby improving also the health of the entire family. The countries that have shown higher education about reproductive health amongst women and girls have less maternal mortality in the world. And we know that in South Sudan, we do have a major challenge in front of us in terms of maternal mortality because of preventable causes. The report also shows that social norms uh, have to be more gender equitable. So improving women's access to livelihood opportunities or leadership roles in communities and beyond um, can increase their power to make decisions within the households and about their own bodies. Again, the report is very relevant to South Sudan in terms of highlighting that the health providers have a very critical role to play in upholding and affirming the bodily autonomy of all those who are seeking information and care. So, for example, our young men and women, the adolescent and youth, how much access to information do they have about their own body? And that's where our healthcare providers and our government, our civil society can play a critical role so that the youth of our country can make informed decisions about their own self and their own bodies. The report also highlights that there is tracking the progress is very important, and when the tracking of in progress is done properly, then the groups that are at the risk of being excluded, um, they get included better. And I think, again, for South Sudan, that's a big lesson that we can take from this report and work towards improving our evidence base regarding the access to healthcare system and the decision making of your own body for women and men both, and girls and boys. Now, the three takeaway messages. I think the first takeaway message for us from this report is that our communities and countries can flourish only when every individual has the power to make decisions about their own bodies and to chart their own futures. So, we really need to work towards generating awareness about the um, the right to bodily autonomy. The second key takeaway for us is that we need to guarantee access, and an unbiased access to sexual and reproductive health care for all with zero discrimination and violence can really have a very positive impact in terms of an overall development and progress for South Sudan, and healthy decisions and safe behaviors by our youth. And when we say youth, we are talking about 70% of South Sudan's population. The third takeaway is that we need to invest more in empowering women and girls. At UNFPA, we know that the communities and countries can flourish only when the women are empowered to make their own informed decisions about their own bodies and lives. So we must end control in areas where women around the world are denied the fundamental right to make their own decisions about their own bodies, and that needs to change, and that can change when we empower the women and girls to start making choices for themselves, and we help men become the champions of gender equality. And I'm very happy to see that Julius is with us today. So when we talk about equal responsibility for parenting, helping men and boys to learn to communicate about sexual and reproductive health and the concerns that they have. Again, we are talking about a society where women and men, girls and boys, talk about their own concerns, aspirations, and challenges in an open environment and work together to find solutions towards it. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shruti, for highlighting what the report is all about. You have clearly defined what bodily autonomy is. You also talked about what the report is about and how the findings are relevant to South Sudan and the key message for South Sudan. And just basically to just highlight some of the few issues that you've talked about. You said bodily autonomy is when a woman or a man have the or is when a woman and a man have the power to decide when to have sex with whom, and for women is to decide how many children they want to have, when they want to have contraceptives. And then you have also talked about how education is a key for the realization of bodily autonomy. You did distinguish that women with educations are much lesser to die of maternal mortality as compared to women without education. Thank you very much, Ms. Shruti, for highlighting what the State of World Population Report entitled "My Body is My Own, Claiming the Right to Autonomy and Self-Determination" that was recently launched by UNFPA globally and also was launched in South Sudan. Now, I'm coming to my second panelist of today, and Ms. Riha, this is going to you. And to start, clearly, as you have, as Shruti has just mentioned, bodily autonomy is a global issue, from the most progressive countries to the low-income ones. As someone who works for the right of women and girls, how are the rights to bodily autonomy violated in the context of South Sudan? My second question is, what is the civil society doing to change the situation? My third question to you, Ms. Riha, is as the executive director for a feminist-led organization, what is Crown the Woman doing to advance the rights of women and girls to bodily autonomy? And my last question on that regard is, what are the toughest challenges that you are facing to make bodily autonomy and the right to self-determination a reality? Over to you, Ms. Riha. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Viola. Thank you, Shruti, for taking us through that report. I wish we would just take this report and share it with everyone in South Sudan to see this and learn, and also have discussions around it. I'll quickly go through the questions that have been asked, and I'm open to any questions that will come up from our viewers as well and listeners. Shruti already defined what bodily autonomy is. For me, bodily autonomy is the right to governance over my body. It is my body. My body here is a dictatorship and not a democracy. We don't negotiate over my body. It is mine and we don't negotiate, you know. Why I bring this is it's been a struggle, you know, as a woman and as a woman of my size and body, you know, we grow, we change. You at one point you're small, the other time you become bigger, and then you're questioned why you fart or take some pills to lose weight. We have seen many women and girls take pills to lose weight, and it has affected their health as well. And I wanted to bring that out. Some years ago, I was a supermodel. I was Miss South Sudan, Uganda, but now I'm big, and everyone is like, Ria, what are you doing? Go to the gym, take some pills. But what are the effects of those pills on our bodies, you know? And looking at South Sudan as a country, our bodies have been abused in very many ways as South Sudanese, specifically women and girls. And this is a time for us to talk about it and really come up with tangible solutions. I want to quickly talk about the violence towards our bodies as South Sudanese, and specifically I'll speak about women and girls because that's my area of work. Um, there is the issue of child marriage, forced marriage. If you force me to marry someone, you're abusing my body, and that's already a human rights violation, and it's an abuse. It's very common in South Sudan. We know that child marriage is rampant. It's over 52% of girls. There are women who, even after school, you don't have the right to they already have a partner for you somewhere in the village. And these are some of the struggles we see as women and in the work that we do. There is a denial of access to health services. And for example, I'm going to talk about the rights to abortion. In South Sudan, we do know that still abortion is not accepted. We as Crown, we have faced in our young girls we work with. There is a young girl that got pregnant, and she of course abortion is not accessible. We tried to run here and there, we couldn't access it, and she took omo, she took a mixture of omo and jik, and she was bleeding badly. So you can imagine, if such rights are denied to us, you can imagine how many girls and women are going to kill themselves because of denial to such accesses. If you move around South Sudanese hospitals, women are really suffering. I a few months ago, my sister was giving birth. There was no incubators. It's only Juba Teaching Hospital with incubators. There was no oxygen. We had to move from Sesfasaba to Juba Teaching Hospital. The babies almost died. It was a grace of God. So as women, also accessing such health services is a problem. Um, Contraceptives, Shruti talked about contraceptives, even Viola mentioned that. I would also want to highlight even access to condoms. We have seen young people like Data Gordon talking about condomizing, but even as women, we're discriminated to access condoms. I went to a pharmacy to buy medicine. I'm like, today I want to test the pharmacist. So I'm like, can I please have condoms? And he looks at me like, no, please go to the other counter. I was sent like to 3 counters. And then they asked me, you're a woman, why are you buying condoms? And I was like, why? Why shouldn't I buy condoms? Don't I have a right to protect myself? Don't I have a right to enjoy sex with condoms? So such kind of things are happening to us. Even sanitary towels. When you talk about sexual reproductive rights, we narrow down to menstruation. Our bodies, our periods are being turned into shame. A girl gets a period, she's shamed, she's laughed at in school. She cannot access sanitary towels. Sanitary towels are expensive, they're highly taxed. Then there is forced abortion, which is not done rightly. One of our cases we've been working on is a young girl who got pregnant to a guy from another tribe, and the mother said, I don't want this man from another tribe. And she gave her some medicine and she started bleeding. She didn't choose to abort because she loved the man and she wanted to keep the baby. There is also, if you look into our curriculum, like our education system and the right to education, I would say it's also limited. Things like sex education are really limited to the girls. We don't talk about sex in South Sudan as openly. In the schools we work in, when you talk about sex, they look at you like this is not the right place to talk about sex. Even talking about sex with our parents. I remember one day I wanted to just talk about sex with my aunt, and she just like, go and do something. If you have nothing to talk about, go do something else. Like, she was so scared to talk about sex. But in other countries, it's normal to talk about sex. I wanted to know, what is sex? How does it happen? When do you do it? These are the topics we should be having with our girls as well. Finally, on the challenges, the choice of choosing partners is still a challenge in South Sudan. It's even always compacted with tribalism. I just got married recently, but it was a tug of war to decide some were telling me you cannot marry this man is because it's from the other tribe or because it's like that. You know, we are limited of who do you marry, who do you love, who do you hang out with. So those are the challenges. As civil society, so many civil societies are trying their best on this specific topic. I would quickly say that we are working collectively. The work is not as much because we are few in a pool of crocodiles, but we are trying our best. There is collective working together. We put out position papers together. We protest together as a team. I remember last year when a young girl was raped, many civil society organizations, women came together to speak against it, to demand for justice for this girl and others who have survived sexual violence. There is also the behind the scenes work that different civil society organizations are doing, providing condoms, providing contraceptives, providing counseling. And I'll quickly go through what Crown Woman has been doing. As Crown Woman as an organization, we have supported so many women and girls. I'll start with a project we're doing in partnership with UNFPA. We are providing life-saving services to survivors of sexual violence, gender-based violence, domestic violence, and other kinds of violence. We have established a national GBV toll-free hotline, 623, where survivors are able to call in and get services they want, like medical treatment, like counseling, like temporary accommodation. We have also mentorship programs in schools and in communities. So in our mentorship programs, we include both boys and girls because we don't want boys to be left behind, because it's not only that our problems as women is not only women. We need to include everyone. So we talk about everything. We talk about sex. We talk about HIV. We talk about our bodies. We talk about even changes in our bodies, because as young girls, when we are growing, you never know that your breasts would one day become large, for example. You never know that you'd get pubic hair, and those changes that happen to our bodies, we share those with our girls as well to help them in their growth. We have put up position papers. We have protested. You've seen some of us on the streets, and we are not about to stop until we see these changes change. About the challenges we are facing, there are many challenges. We have pushbacks in societies when we try to speak about rights like who do you choose who to sleep with, or when do you choose when to have children. We have backlashes from of course so many community members, so many community leaders. They say a woman in South Sudan has no right. If they pay your dowry, you have no right to converse or talk about your body, because your body has already been paid for. You're like property. We are like, no, we are not property. And it's very important to bring out the issue of how is dowry even affecting us as a society, as a community, as South Sudanese. Also, we have challenges of how do we even start opening up to people who do not understand this kind of issues. And as Shruti put it well, we need to have continuous awareness, continuous education. As an organization, we have limited funding. We want to try our best to do everything, but the funding and resources are very limited and small. So I will stop here and welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Riha, for highlighting the key challenges and how bodily autonomy is being violated in South Sudan. You have also talked about what Crown the Woman is doing in terms of fulfillment of the rights to bodily autonomy of women and girls. And then you talked about some few challenges that you are facing in the quest of realization of gender equality in South Sudan. Maybe just to highlight a few things that you've talked about, Ms. Riha, you've talked about limited access to health services, and here you talked about sexual reproductive health services, issues of having condoms for women and young girls, the issues around contraceptives. You've talked how the society is still pushing back on some of these services that are critical for women and girls to realize their rights to bodily autonomy. You did mention how South Sudan doesn't have laws around abortion, and indeed abortion is illegal in South Sudan. To perform it has to go to a number of doctors, the physician have to sign, and that sometimes bring a lot of risk to these young women or girls who really want to abort their child, or who are not really in need of these children, and they are forced to bring children that they did not intend in the first place. You also did talk about that there are also parents or some community members who are forcing abortions on women and girls, and you did raise that example of a young girl that was forced by her mother to abort a child because the man is someone the family did not want. You talked about issues around sexuality education in general in South Sudan is a taboo. People don't want to talk about it, and therefore they tend to shy away from talking about sex, and because of that, they have objected sexuality education in some communities and in some schools. You also did talk about the choice of choosing a partner. For once, like this is somebody you would want to spend the rest of your life with, but still our societies are making it, tribalizing it, the right to choose who you want to spend the rest of your life with. You talked about many other issues like child marriage, forced marriages. You've talked about rape, and all this really violate the right to bodily autonomy. And you've also talked about what civil society is doing, like Crown the Woman, you're doing mentorship programs. You're also providing life-saving services for survivors of GBV through the 623, a national GBV helpline. Those are just key things that I wanted to highlight from your presentation. Thank you very much, Ms. Riha. Viewers, I would like also to remind you again that you can directly ask questions and direct your questions to our 4 panelists of today. So please feel free to write your question down, and we'll take note, and we'll give the panelists the opportunity to be able to interact with you in our next session. Now, I want to move away a bit to change the conversation, and here I mean I want to give a chance to our only male panelists in this discussion, and that's Julius Bushiri. Now, Mr. Bushiri, men are always or almost always the guilty party when we talk about violation of women's rights to bodily autonomy. Now, here I just have like 4 questions for you, Mr. Bushiri. And my first question is, where is this sense of entitlement coming from? My second question, do you think men and women played a role in allowing this misconception to become a norm in our society? Now, my third question for you is, are boys and young men also experiencing violation to their right to bodily autonomy and self-determination? And now, my fourth and the last question for you, Mr. Bushiri, is, what can men do, and how can we better engage men to achieve our goal of living in a South Sudan where both men and women and boys and girls coexist harmoniously, where individual rights are respected without any bias placed on their gender? Now, with those few questions, I would like to give you the floor, Mr. Bushiri. You are welcome.
Thank you so much, Viola, and thank you so much to my co-panelists. It's quite a difficult thing to speak after Shiruti and Ria have spoken. But yes, indeed, I'll take on the questions as you mentioned. And for the first question about the entitlement, I want to say this. First of all, let me demystify this, that it's not biological, and because that's what most men would say, it's our DNA, and I would want to challenge that because most of them who will say that, they are not even scientists, so I don't even know what they say is their DNA, where they got that from. And to go straight on to your question, where the sense of entitlement is coming from, I think there are a number of factors. Now that I've ruled out nature, I think it all comes to nurture, how the environment and how somebody is raised and how they raise themselves, because I'll not blame only those who have raised them, because at some point you reach a certain age where you start raising yourself. So up to that point, then you become responsible for all the decisions you take. And different societies have a different age, but I'll not delve into that. So for me, I look at a number of factors, but the first factor that comes to my mind is culture. And in culture, I would want to speak to language. It may sound shocking, but of all the different literature I've read and all the different engagements I've had, it's through language and the different forms of propagating language that we communicate culture and way of living. Now, I would want to say this without going into details, that if you interrogate all our languages, you realize that for most of the languages, except in areas where they have reformed, when they are referring to women or anything feminine, it's sort of coming lower than when they are referring to something masculine. I would speak to my own my own language. English, luckily enough, doesn't have English is either feminine, masculine, or something that is neutral. So anything that is an object will be it, and it's not she or he. But in my language, every object is either assigned a masculine or a feminine. And then if you sat down and understood how they assign this, you realize that something that seems to come out strong, something that seems to come out dominant is given masculine. And then something that seems to come out passive and not dominant would be given as feminine. And then a child grows up thinking with that kind of, grading in their mind. And then if by any chance they live by only that language, surely you will expect that in future they will start to think that anything masculine is dominant. And that's just one. The other thing is, even when we've got the chance to go to school, I'm not so sure how the curricula these days are, you realize that when examples are being given in different subjects, you will find that, I think, even for the teachers, I think they now need to begin to be careful how the examples are given, be it mathematics, be it English, be it literature, be it any subject. You will find that there is a lot of emphasis on male characters. So if they are teaching history, whereas there have been women who have done quite a lot in history, their stories are not brought on top as such. And then how that fits into bodily autonomy is that when somebody continues to grow thinking that something masculine is superior, it's very difficult to take that out of them. I'll speak to this later on when we are closing, in my analogy of yeast and bread. Remind me if I forget. But that's one other thing. Then there comes the issue of religion and all our different beliefs. I want to believe that all religions mean good for everybody. If you studied them very well, that's what they do. But what happens is that there is selective application of doctrines. So people would go for such doctrines in any religion that would actually put men in a superior position. And when they continue to say that, it reinforces the message. Whereas if you sat down and read most of these religious books, you would find that whichever the religion is, there is equality mentioned there. But nobody would want to bring those to the table, because in most cases, the clerics are men. And they would feel that their authority is being challenged by the fact that they are on the altar as men, and they have to mention that actually women have to be at the altar. So those are some of the things that eventually then, when you look at how society moves, it turns the society towards a direction where men tend to violate women's body autonomy. Then second last, there is this issue of how the society, and maybe it may not be common in cities, but in some cliques it's there. You would find that men tend to socialize with men. And then there is that echo chamber of reinforcing the same bad message. And then when women socialize with women, if that group is not also informed enough not to regurgitate the same wrong things that are happening in society and accepting them, society will continue like that. And then once they meet out of their different echo chambers, the men will come out thinking they are dominant, And the women, because they have been echoing the same challenges they've been having, they will come out thinking they are not dominant. And then that tends to shift how somebody thinks when they're in a certain situation. And then finally, I would want to put this squarely on the media. I've seen a number of adverts, and for sure, when you look at these adverts, they are objectifying women's bodies. And I wonder what our media authorities are doing. Yeah? And I'm very glad, I think, I don't remember the exact car company, but there was a time I think one car company had to stop the advertising of vehicles with women standing next to the vehicles. They would basically put the woman there as the feminine and the car there as a powerful engine vehicle that is masculine. And I'm thinking, okay, have we got to that level? For sure. And so when people view that, what goes into the back of their mind, their decision-making matrix, eventually the output is what we are trying to fight right now. So I would leave it to that. I'll go to your second question, whether men and women are equally involved. And I think if you realize from my previous talk, yes, men take the biggest portion of that. But I would want to say, when it comes to culture, for most societies, the woman is closer to the child in the first years, and I think we need to reflect on that. What are we telling these children? What are we accepting them to hear? And so, if we can start challenging it at that point, there's a Catholic priest who told me, if you give me a child up to the age of 4, they will remain Catholic forever, because that's the time when the message goes into their mind. So I think if we could take the chance to ensure that at that time, what goes into the mind of children is the right message that actually cultivates the good culture, I think that would be good. So basically, my answer is all of us are equal, are not into this. Although men tend to propagate this more, there's a role to play on all sides, and the critical role can be viewed depending on what angle you want to take. Then second last, do I think that boys and men also have challenges with their body autonomy? The answer is yes. It may not be the same as for women, and I want to say this, that most of the perpetrators for the boys would actually be men. This, I may not have statistics to this, but I want to say this. For me, I look at it, especially from the African perspective. For most of the cultures that have rituals where you have to transit from being a boy to a man, I don't know what they mean by that, but you would find that there are some rituals that have to be done. In some cases, it's circumcision. In some cases, I've been told there are some traditions where a boy has to go and kill a lion. Now, is that really the best thing to put a young man as a challenge to become a man? I mean, either way, they will become a man, whether you like it or not, but that kind of thing. So there's that part of the rituals and the transition from boyhood to childhood, from childhood to adulthood, that also poses a risk. And then, of course, as Ria had said earlier, when it comes to marriage and also what goes on after somebody is married, usually many men at that point, they are really coerced to marry people they wouldn't have wanted to marry. And even when they are married, there is that pressure that we need children. In my tradition, we name children, we give children names of their grandparents. And as I sit here, I have pressure from my mother, but I've told her this won't happen, because she says I need to name my so and so. I need to name but I told her this is a different era. I'll name those that I can name, and we'll move forward. You'll enjoy those that are here. So there's that pressure, and then it needs somebody to know that this is the limit. This is my mother. Yes, I respect her. This is my father. I respect him, but I think this is my government. I like my father because he says, now you are on your own. And you have your own governments. When I come to your home, I'm coming like a dignitary, as an ambassador coming to your home. So I respect your management, and when you come to mine, you respect mine. So I think there's a lot of pressure in marriage, and that really affects the men. Then to the last question, Viola, what can be done? I think the first thing to do for most men, especially those who have already been preached to and they have converted and they have understood that we have a role to play, is to stop shying away from coming out. I think there are many men who want to speak about these things, but they feel like they will lose the support of their male colleagues. But I think that's the wrong decision. So the first step is for most men who have accepted and they have seen the light to come out and speak about these things and ensure that the group of men talking about this increases over time until we get that critical mass to change the society. Now, besides those men, for those that have not yet crossed the line, I think the first thing is to sit down and reflect, and for sure think about it. We have done a lot of injustice to women and girls in the past. It may not be me, it may not be my father, it may not be my grandfather, but if you read history very well, and if you can think about things that have been happening, I think men have done a lot of damage. And the first step is to accept that yes, we've done a lot of damage, and the best we can do is we may not pay for all that damage, but is to do better than those other generations that came before us. And once we get that, then we can do some self-reflection on what we can do better, and definitely reach out for dialogue, because if you're going to help somebody, you cannot decide on your own how you're going to help them. So basically, the dialogue I'm talking about is dialogue between husband and wife, brother and sister, colleagues at workplace, on really what can I do to be a better man. I want to say this. I wasn't this of a feminist, of an activist for women empowerment throughout my life. There were years in my adolescence where we had peer pressure, and you would do things, but I reached a point and I reflected. Gladly enough, I had parents who supported me to see things the just way. And when I reached that critical point, I reflected and I realized that the best I can do is to do better. Dialogue with my sisters, dialogue with my colleagues, and ask them what can be done better, and stick to that which they have told me. However much it makes me lose ground as a man, I mean, because most men think they are losing ground, and I want to use that in quotes, because definitely there's no ground to lose. We are all here, and we'll all survive on this earth, whether men are many or few, whether women are many or few. This world is far enough for all of us. So I think once we do that, we will get there. Thank you, Viola.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bushiri, for bringing that male perspective to this discussion. Clearly, just some few highlights from your discussion right there, that you have said the entitlement is not born, is something that has been nurtured, and perhaps through the cultural practices and beliefs that the society has subjected men and women to, and most of this are gender unequal. And so you've also talked about how the media has played a negative role in really objectifying women's and men differently. You also did mention that though many women and girls violation is higher than men and boys also, their rights are also being violated in South Sudan for that same reason. And you gave an example of how men and boys are also being forced into forced marriages. You did talk also about how when men and boys' rights to bodily autonomy is being violated, is another man's that is violating it. And you did encourage male champions out there, those who believe in gender equality, to really use their voice to come out clearly and pursue the cause and speak up and against some of these cultural practices that undermines rights of women and girls to bodily autonomy. You gave some few examples on your personal experience, how, of course, thinking equal or becoming a feminist and having feminism view is not a born thing, it's something you learn and nurture along the way as you progress. And you did also acknowledge that along the way you might have somehow you might have missed some of this reality, but now you're progressing towards ensuring that you all the time use your voice to promote gender equality. Thank you very much, Mr. Bushiri for highlighting and bringing the male perspective to this discussion. Now I'm gonna change the discussion, and I want to bring in our youngest panelists in this panel discussion, and that's Miss Diana Nunu. And Miss Diana, as the lone voice representing young girls and young people in general in this panel discussion, I have three questions for you. One is, kindly please cite three examples how rights to bodily autonomy of young girls has been violated in South Sudan. My second question for you is, what is your appeal to parents, the elderly, and stakeholders influencing girls and young girls' self-determination and rights to bodily autonomy? And then my third question and the last is, what are your three key messages to your fellow young people in South Sudan in terms of how they can ensure that they fulfill their rights to bodily autonomy? Miss Diana, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, Viola, and I want to thank the previous panelists for elaborating more on bodily autonomy. However, I know most of you have spoken a lot, but I just have some key points to make into this discussion. And one is for us as a South Sudanese to make sure that bodily autonomy is it's adhered at all family levels and in different societies. I think we need to establish direct communication, and that is one of the violations of bodily autonomy in most of our families. When we speak about sexuality education, I think there is need to establish direct communication in instances where we have to be mentioning our body parts to the young girls as they are. If it is the vagina, we need.
Okay, sorry, we have technical issues with Miss Diana connection. We will bring her back shortly as soon we have her issue fixed. Now, I would like to go back to Shuruti and Shuruti, yes. Let me go back, Shuruti. Shuruti, you're joining us from India and you are an Indian nationality. Maybe you can share some of few examples how feminists in India have really put forth in terms of achieving bodily autonomy and realizing that whatever progress that have been made there by feminists. Maybe you can just highlight some few progress and how it came about for people like Riha and Bushiri to take some 2 or 3 lessons from it. Over to you, Ms. Shruti.
Thank you, Viola. And I think there's so much to learn from each other as the feminist movement, for the Indian feminist movement to learn from South Sudanese feminist movement, and for South Sudanese feminist movement to learn from Indian. And as we were discussing in the beginning, you know that this issue is global. It runs across everywhere. Now, to share some of the examples, I remember, back in 2001, 2002, when India did not have the the law on domestic violence, addressing domestic violence. So again, in during that period, being part of the civil society, there was a huge collaboration that was done by the feminist actors, um, all women, men coming together, talking about what all do we want to see in addressing domestic violence law, because there was no law that was addressing domestic violence in its totality. There was no recognition of marital rape. And we know that in South Sudan, again, we do not have, at the moment, we do not have a comprehensive anti-GBV law. And certainly marital rape is not recognized. So due to the feminist movement, civil society actors coming together, government taking proactive role in discussing what provisions are needed. There were several discussions undertaken, and then at the end, in 2005, there was a law passed called Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act. And now you do see that there is a recognition that just as a violation of bodily autonomy by any external actor is a crime, so it is a crime when it is done by your own intimate partner as well. And I think that is coming at after a long struggle, because in our society, I think Julius was mentioning it and Ria was also mentioning it, that in our societies, be it India, be it South Sudan, we consider that these decisions of marriage, decisions of children, these are all family decisions. So we consider that, oh, you paid the bride price for South Sudan. In India, it is dowry. So that's been paid, even if the girl doesn't receive even a single penny out of it, because it's a transaction taking place between the elders of the families. It's the women who is considered as a property, and that is why the violence against women goes on within the household as well as outside. So that's one thing that I think a good progress made, and I hope that in South Sudan we really take forward the anti-GBV bill that is now ready to take it forward one step further and have it legalized, so that we take actions further in terms of having realized the equal rights. The other aspect is also about the sexual harassment in public places. Now again, I think Ria mentioned in the beginning that in if you are fat, no girl, no woman is told that you have the perfect body, right? If you are thin, you are too thin. If you are fat, you're too fat. If you have, there is, the society always tells us that you are never good enough under your own skin. And this gets translated in terms of the violence and harassment that you face in public places. So that is in the form of sexual violence, that is in the form of always demonstrating that no matter what you do, you are never good enough. And again, the legal battle to recognize sexual harassment in workplace, sexual harassment in public places was a major challenge. And that came in India as a result of a very tragic case that happened against a frontline worker who faced challenges with regards to sexual harassment. There was a custodial rape case. So again, we know that the conflict-related sexual violence is also quite rife in South Sudan. So I think these legal actions, and then following those legal actions through a proper systems in place where the government, the civil society, and people in general come together. I think these examples I could share from India. And I think we have Diana back, so we can carry forward the discussion.
Thank you very much, Shruti, for, I think we have also benefited from how feminists and gender activists are actually paving ways and laying the foundation globally in terms of rights to bodily autonomy. Now, our youngest member of the panelists is back, and I just want to ask my questions again as they were, as the lone voice representing young girls in this panel, Ms. Diana. My first question is, cite 3 examples how right to bodily autonomy of young girls has been violated in South Sudan. My second question for you is, what is your appeal to parents and the elderly and stakeholders influencing young girls' self-determination and rights to bodily autonomy? My last question is, what are your 3 key messages to your fellow young people in South Sudan, and particularly those who will watch this stream. And with that, I would like to give you the opportunity. The floor is yours, Miss Diana.
Yeah, thank you so much, Madam. We're just facing some technical issues here, but we shall sort it out. Yeah, thank you so much, Madam Viola. And earlier on, I was talking about the lack of direct communication between parents and young girls, and that is one of the key things that have violated young girls' rights to bodily autonomy. I think that is something that parents should not shy away from speaking about sexuality education in their homes. And I think in South Sudan, when we speak about sex and menstruation, it is a taboo in most of our houses. And I think that also I can give my personal example. I have a young daughter who just started her menstruation periods, and it was very difficult for me to establish that direct communication with her. And that is due to how I was brought up in a family where people do not speak about menstruation, issues of sex, and when your breasts are now coming, what are you preparing for? If you're menstruating, what is going to happen? I think these are some of the things that we lack in our communities, and they violate the right to bodily autonomy. And the second thing I just wanted to bring to this panel discussion is the access to young girls, access to sexual reproductive health of young girls has been violated, and that is due to the judgmental attitudes of the service providers in most healthcare centers in South Sudan. Normally, when a young person goes to visit these services, they are faced with elderly women or men who are in charge of giving these services to them. But at the end of the day, sometimes they are turned down because when you go for contraceptive, the logic behind our culture is that you've already started having sex and maybe you're having multiple sex partners. And I think that is a discussion that has made young girls to shy away from accessing services to sexual reproductive health. And I think Ria spoke more about the condom use. I think it is really becoming so bad for young people to have condoms in such public spaces. Like when a young person, a lady, for instance, gets to ask for a condom, they already know that sex is happening and maybe this person is having multiple sex partners, and there is name shaming that you're a sex worker. So I think these are some of the things that violate the rights to bodily autonomy for young girls in South Sudan. And the other thing I just want to bring to this discussion, which was previously also spoken by my colleagues, is the issue of early and forced child marriages in South Sudan. And I think South Sudan is no longer a safe place for the girl child. And that is in most cultures, when a girl starts seeing her menstrual periods, I think the community and even the parents start preparing her to get married. And this actually deprives the young person from choosing the right partner for herself. And also it deprives the girl to have that self-determination of when I want to get married, at what age do I need to get married, and whom do I need to get married to. So these are some of the things that violate the rights to bodily autonomy. And lastly, on the three things that violates young girls' rights to bodily autonomy is the harmful cultures. We all know that in South Sudan, when a young girl is to get married, like in some cultures, you have to go through what they say, the virginity test. And I think that goes back to where we are having early child marriages, because most parents tend to say that when a girl is a virgin, the cows or the bride price will be more than that of a woman who has maybe aged or beyond the age of 16 years or 17 years. So I think these harmful cultures are also violating young people's rights to bodily autonomy. And we also have cultures of girl-child compensation, which happens also in part of in Eastern Equatoria, if I may say. Like a girl child is compensated for the blood lost of a relative, and that greatly violates the girl's rights to bodily autonomy because she doesn't have any choice, and where you're just taken to a family where you don't know and you're subjected to, abuse, domestic violence, and all that. So these are some of the key things that violates a young girl's rights to bodily autonomy. And the other thing I also want to bring to the discussion is about what can we do as young people and as parents and as stakeholders. I think this is a very great discussion. We need to continue these discussions because many people do not know that they have the rights to bodily autonomy. In South Sudan specifically, we all know that our choices depend on our parents, and with our communities. You're not allowed to make any choice of how you want to be or how you want to look like. And if you look like somebody else, and then you're subjected to body shaming. So basically, the discussions must start now, and it has to go beyond this. And that's why I would say we need to start having mentorship sessions so that young people, young girls can know that they also have their rights to bodily autonomy. I'm quite sure that in South Sudan, there are very few girls who know that they have the rights to decide on the number of partners, for instance, they want to have, and at what age do they want to get married, and at what age are they supposed to get married. So those are the discussions that we need to take down to the grassroots level. And then the other thing is, I am quite sure of, and I spoke during the launch of this great document, is let's start initiating dialogues with parents, because I'm quite sure that parents do not know what bodily autonomy are. Maybe some of them are just subjected to do that because of the communities where they are in, and they have no choice but to accept what their culture tells them or directs them to do. So I think we need to initiate dialogues with parents and also teach parents what bodily autonomy are, and also include our community leaders who are actually custodians of culture, and maybe go to the religious leaders in our communities to start talking about how important it is to have a discussion on bodily autonomy. And I think this is quite important to me because once a young person knows their right to bodily autonomy, and a family knows, we are able to trace on all the rape cases in South Sudan, and we will have that channel of communication where reporting of issues of sexual abuse and gender-based violence becomes quite easier. And also we will be enabling discussions where people have the rights to say what they want to say, but they are not subjected to cultural influences and what the community thinks about them. The other thing is about I think the issue of the comprehensive sexuality education. I am very happy that UNFPA has started that work, and also AMREF is doing that. I think we need to not only stop in Juba, but we have to cover up all the 10 states so that people will know about what comprehensive sexuality education is for both those in school and those out of school. And that actually enhances a discussion where every young person is empowered and every young girl is empowered to know what is good for herself or himself and the choices that they make. And the other recommendation I would make is I think most of these violations to bodily autonomy due to the economic crisis within the country, and also poverty within some families that has made most parents to actually violate the rights of their young girls to bodily autonomy. So I think we need to channel the discussion to empowering women economically so that they become very strong and they become independent, and they are able to make decisions, and they are not influenced by the cultures where they are actually vulnerable to make such decisions due to the crisis that economic vulnerability that women actually face. So I think economic empowerment becomes one of the solid recommendation that we need to take upon, empower our women to make sure that they are no longer vulnerable to poverty and all the harmful cultures that communities would subject them to, and that would make them to marry off their daughters so that they can fend for their own families. The other thing I also want to bring this is the issue of security. I think most of the rape cases that have happened in South Sudan in the past 3 years, it's due to the insecurity and the conflict that has erupted in South Sudan. And that basically also deprives the young girls right to bodily autonomy, because we've witnessed a lot of rape cases during the crisis in some of the locations, and it is actually worse for those who are living in POCs, because there is that culture where people have to live in the same house. Maybe you find 5 people are living in the same roof, and young girls tend to learn a lot of sexual behavior through their families. And we have also seen wife sharing for those husbands maybe who have been separated by their families. So basically, those are some of the things that I will bring to the discussion. One is to advocate for the implementation of the peace agreement so that everybody is safe in their houses. And when a girl goes to school, she doesn't have to think that when I come back from school, I will be raped on my way. And when a woman goes to cultivate, she doesn't have to be subjected to those violence that will happen on her way to her agricultural backyards. And lastly, I think the only recommendation I will tell young people is we do not have to shy in speaking about our sexuality, our desires, because that is where the basis of our rights lies. When something uh, does not move well with you, I think it is always good to open up a discussion where people can be able to learn about what are those things that deprives my right as a young person. And the other thing is we need to initiate spaces where young people are able to deliver services such as condoms to their fellow young people. And also youth organizations must start the discussion now with their communities, and rally for funding so that many people are able to know about their bodily autonomy in South Sudan. But also, it's very important that once we want women or communities to know about the right to bodily autonomy, it has to start right from the family level, so that the custodians of the girl child from the family level know what it is to have bodily autonomy. Thank you so much. Over to you, Viola.
Thank you very much. We have heard from Ms. Diana, representing the young voice in this panel discussion. She has highlighted some of very specific ways in which young people's rights to bodily autonomy is being violated in South Sudan. Among some of the things she has highlighted is the issues of child marriage, of girls not being able to decide whom they want to marry, making choices on who they want to have children with and whom they want to have sex with. And then she also talked about issues of virginity testing, subjecting young girls particularly to being abused, harassed, and their body being defined as something that has to be pure to suit the society beliefs. She talks about how service providers are actually are discriminating young people when it comes to access to sexual reproductive health services. She highlighted the needs for young people or youth-friendly services that give space for young people to provide services to their own or their fellow young people to avoid the discrimination they are facing in health facilities. She requested both parents and people who are working with young people to ensure that they provide space and listening ear to talk to young people about their sexuality, about what abuse or how the society is abusing their right to bodily autonomy. She did highlight that because during the war and particularly those young people who are living in the POC, they've been subjected to a number of abuses, sexual abuse. They've also been subjected to incest because they were confined in one place. They've also seen things that they were not supposed to see because the space was very limited. Thank you very much, Ms. Diana, for highlighting those key issues affecting young people to right to bodily autonomy and for bringing those voices in this panel discussion. Now, viewers, I am reminding you again that this is a dialogue, and please, if you have questions to my panelists, direct them and write them in the comments box, and we will be able to give opportunities to the panelists to answer them. As I cannot see any question, I will probably go back to my first panelist, and that's Ms. Shuruti. And just to give you 1 minute, what is your last comment or your last word for this panel discussion? Over to you.
Thank you, Viola, and thanks a lot to everyone in the panel, as well as some of the comments that are coming in. Very, very lively discussion. My last word would be that it's not a last word, last word from this discussion, but we will continue this discourse. When we are talking about bodily autonomy, we are essentially talking about two critical elements. We are talking about consent and we are talking about choice. And I am sure all of us participating here, or those who are not even participating here, but we know in our society, in our neighborhood, nobody would say that consent is wrong or choice is making the choice for yourself is wrong. And I think when we are talking about right to bodily autonomy or the right to decide for my own body, that choice and the consent have to be respected. And I think that's what we need to instill in our society with parents, with children, with the youth who are in school or outside. And that has to be reflected in our legal frameworks and its implementation. And I'm sure we will get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shruti, for highlighting that bodily autonomy is about consent and choice, two very distinct and yet carry a lot of volume. Now, Ms. Riha, your last word from you, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Viola. For me, I would just want to conclude and say that let's continue having conversations on the bodily autonomy topic because not so many of us know about it. Not so many of us know about our rights, even about our bodies and how they're changing. So let's have conversations and dialogue about it. For those who are fighting, let's keep fighting. The fighting is not going to stop. It's going to come in many forms. You know, today you go to a hospital as a woman, you ask for your scan and they say, bring your husband so they can give you the results. So we have to keep on fighting in those places. And we have to keep on mentoring young girls and young boys because we have to change the narrative. Our mothers were not there. We are not there yet, but the ones following us have to be in a better place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Riha. And now to our only male panelists and male feminists in this discussion. Over to you, Mr. Bushir.
Thank you so much. I'll just say two things. It's unfortunate that society has given a lot of power to men, but I would want to use that to my own benefit in my fight for women empowerment. I would want to encourage all men that now that you have a lot of power and control, don't use that power and control on society. Use that power and control on yourself. I think if we have that, we will have a lot of peace everywhere. Because I think most of the problems we are having is that as men, we are failing to use our power on ourselves and to control ourselves. And I think if we can turn that power and control inwards, I think we'll not even have these discussions in the coming years. So that's one. And then number two, I would want to say this for all the male listeners. If you have enjoyed a happy life, if you have enjoyed a life where society is appreciating you as you are, as a person, as a fair person, as a good person, for lack of a better word, think about how you came there. It's higher chances there's somebody somewhere who took a decision to give you that kind of upbringing, to give you that kind of opportunity. And if you are very careful enough, without being gender insensitive, it's high chances it's a woman at the back of that. And for me, I live with this. I know that there are decisions that were taken by. I'm sorry to go personal, but for me, this is at the bottom line. There are things that I enjoy right now because my mother took decisions that would not have gone fair in her times. This is a woman who had no school, not even one day in school. She always says she's the graduate who never saw any blackboard. But it's the decisions she took that have given me the life I live. So I reflect on that, on how I would want other women to benefit in life, because for sure I would want to believe that if only all women are given the right to choose what they want to be, society will be much fairer than it is now. And I think everyone wants a fair society. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Mr. Bushiri, for bringing that, and what a country to have than to have a fair and just society that considers rights of every person, regardless of their sex and gender. Thank you very much for those few remarks. Now I'm coming back to my young panelist member, and that's Miss Diana. What's your last word?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank this discussion. And I think my last word goes back to the organizers of this panel discussion. And I hope that we will be able to bring young men on this panel discussion and make July a month of my body and my choice. And I think it has to go down to the grassroots level. Viola, I think this you have to take note of. We need to go to the different villages and know that July, it's a month of my body and my choice. Meanwhile, I have learned a lot, and I have learned about India having a gang group that beats, perpetrators of sexual abuse. And Ria, I think we can take that up and form our own gang so that we are able to beat the men who violate women's rights. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the listeners, those who have been participating on the chat box. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much again to my wonderful panelists for today. Miss Shruti Apudai, thank you very much. I appreciate your participation in this panel. Thank you very much, Ms. Riha William, for your participation in this panel discussion. Thank you very much, Ms. Diana, and to our only male panelists. Thank you very much. Viewers, thank you for your comments. We have seen some of them. It was really indeed a great topic to discuss. One of those topics that South Sudanese shy away to discuss, but I think we need to start the conversation, and the conversation needs to get going, including in our homes, in all the spaces that we occupy. Let's talk about bodily autonomy and avoid its violation. Thank you very much. It was my honor, again, facilitating and moderating this session. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.